The city was alive with energy, a stark contrast to the loneliness that sometimes crept into even the grandest of nights. Nate Carter, a man whose name carried weight in real estate circles, stepped out of an opulent gala, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. As he adjusted his cufflinks, his gaze landed on something, or rather someone, who didn't belong in this glittering world. A woman, wrapped in layers too thin for the night's cold, sat hunched against the brick wall. She wasn't begging. She wasn't even looking at passers-by. Instead, she stared ahead, lost in thoughts far from this place. Something about her presence unsettled him. It wasn't just the contrast between their worlds.
Hello, I'm the storyteller of the channel, and I would like to ask for a second of your time to subscribe, activate the notification bell, and like the video so that YouTube can take our story to more people who are passionate about stories like this. Thank you, and without further ado, let's continue with our story.
Hers, filled with struggle, his overflowing with privilege. No, it was the quiet dignity in the way she held herself. While others barely noticed her existence, Nate couldn't seem to look away. It was a rare thing, encountering someone who carried both hardship and strength in equal measure. He found himself walking toward her, an impulse that surprised even him. The closer he got, the more he realized this wasn't just another person down on their luck. This was a real story waiting to be told. He crouched beside her, offering a polite smile. "Hey, can I get you something? A meal, maybe?" His voice was warm, sincere, something not often found in men of his status. But she didn't react the way most would. She didn't light up with gratitude, didn't jump at the offer of a helping hand. Instead, she looked at him with quiet defiance, her hazel eyes guarded. "I'm fine," she said, her tone steady, her posture unshaken. The rejection caught him off guard. People in need usually accepted kindness, didn't they? Nate hesitated, unsure if he should insist or walk away. "Are you sure?" He tried again, lowering his voice as if to avoid making a spectacle of the moment. "I don't mind. Really?" She exhaled, shifting slightly but never breaking eye contact. "I don't take charity," she replied, her voice firm, though not unkind. The words were simple, but they carried a weight he hadn't expected. There was pride there, an unyielding, unwavering pride, and with it, a quiet strength that intrigued him. He should have left it at that. Should have walked away like everyone else did. Yet, something about her pulled him back. The city had seen thousands of souls like hers, people who had fallen through the cracks, who had lost their way, who had stories no one bothered to hear. But this story, this emotional story, felt different. He didn't just see a woman in need. He saw someone who had once stood on steady ground and somehow lost her footing. And for reasons he couldn't explain, he wanted to know why. "All right," he said, standing up but not walking away just yet. "But if you ever change your mind." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a business card, and placed it beside her. She didn't even look at it. Her attention was elsewhere, as if she had already decided the world had nothing left to offer her. But Nate? He wasn't convinced. Something told him their paths weren't meant to cross just once. And as he stepped away, the thought lingered in his mind. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't where their story ended. Maybe it was only the beginning. Nate told himself it was just curiosity, but the truth ran deeper. He couldn't stop thinking about her. This woman who had nothing yet carried herself like she still had everything. Days passed, yet her quiet defiance lingered in his mind. Finally, he gave in. He returned to the same street, half expecting her to be gone. But there she was, sitting in the same spot, as if time had stood still. This time, he didn't offer help. He just sat down on the cold pavement, a few feet away, letting silence do the work. Emily, as he soon learned her name to be, wasn't one for small talk. She didn't trust easily, and Nate couldn't blame her. "People only help when they want to feel better about themselves," she said one evening, her arms crossed, eyes fixed on the distant city lights. He listened, not interrupting. There was something profound in the way she spoke, like someone who had once believed in kindness but had been let down too many times. She had lived an emotional story, one with too many chapters of pain. As days turned into weeks, her walls, though sturdy, began to show cracks. Piece by piece, she let him in. Emily had once been someone, a woman with a home, a job, a routine. But life had a cruel way of pulling the rug out from under people when they least expected it. A layoff turned into overdue bills. Overdue bills led to eviction, one thing after another, and suddenly she had nowhere to go, no family to catch her, no safety net, just the streets. And the world? It had simply moved on without her. Nate had heard touching stories before, stories of struggle, resilience, and redemption. But hearing it from Emily made it real in a way he hadn't felt before. She wasn't just some cautionary tale. She was a person who had fought to stay afloat, only to be swallowed by a system that didn't care. "It's not that I don't want help," she admitted one night, her voice quieter than usual. "I just don't want to feel like a burden." The words hit him harder than he expected. One evening he brought coffee, not as an offer, but as an unspoken agreement. If she wanted to talk, she'd have something warm in her hands. That night, she took the cup without protest. That was the moment Nate knew she was beginning to trust him. It wasn't much, but in a world where trust was rare and kindness often came with a price, it meant everything. This wasn't about charity. This was about seeing someone, truly seeing them, when the rest of the world had chosen to look away. But trust was a fragile thing, and Nate knew better than to rush it. He let the conversations unfold naturally, never pushing, never forcing. And in return, Emily gave him something most people never did: honesty. "Do you ever feel like you don't belong in your own life?" she asked one night. The question caught him off guard. He had wealth, power, everything a person could want. And yet, for the first time, he wondered if he truly felt at home in his own world. There was something about Emily that made him reflect in ways he never had before. She had lost everything, yet she still carried something money couldn't buy: perspective. And as they sat there, two people from opposite worlds sharing coffee under flickering streetlights, Nate realized something. This wasn't just about her story anymore. It was about both of them. And whether he knew it or not, this real story was only just beginning. One evening, as the city buzzed around them, Nate made an offer. "There's a place," he said, his voice careful, measured. "It's not much, but it's yours if you want it." Emily stiffened. She had seen this before: kindness that came with strings, generosity that demanded gratitude. "I told you," she murmured, staring at the pavement. "I don't take charity." But Nate was ready for that answer. "It's not charity," he countered. "It's a second chance. No expectations. Just a fresh start." The words hung in the air between them, waiting. She didn't say yes right away. How could she? Trust wasn't built in a day. And the streets, cold, cruel as they were, had become familiar. Stepping into something new felt almost scarier than staying where she was. But something about Nate made it hard to say no. He wasn't trying to fix her. He wasn't pitying her. He just saw her. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to take the first step. Just for a little while, she finally muttered, more to herself than to him. The apartment was small but warm, nothing like the endless concrete she had known. For the first time in years, she had a door that locked, a bed that didn't have to be guarded, and a window that framed the city instead of trapping her in it. Yet, comfort felt foreign. The first night, she barely slept. The silence was too loud, the walls too clean, the warmth too unfamiliar. Her fingers traced the fabric of the blanket, as if testing whether it was real. This wasn't her world. Not yet. Days passed, and Emily struggled to adjust. A hot shower, a stocked fridge. Things once taken for granted now felt overwhelming. She hesitated before using anything, afraid it would be taken away. And deep down, there was a voice whispering that she didn't deserve this, that she hadn't earned it. But Nate? He never made her feel like she owed him anything. He checked in, but never hovered. He left space, but never disappeared. And that, more than anything, made her start to believe that maybe, just maybe, she belonged here. Slowly, the wall she had built around herself began to crack. One morning, she brewed coffee. Not just for herself, but for Nate too. A simple gesture, but for her, it was something bigger. It was a thank you she wasn't ready to say out loud. And when he took the cup with a quiet smile, she realized something. This wasn't just about her. This was about trust, about choosing to believe in people again. She wasn't naive. She knew life wouldn't magically fix itself overnight. But for the first time in years, she allowed herself to think beyond just surviving. What she could rebuild, where she could stand on her own again. The thought terrified her. It excited her. And as she sat by the window, watching the world move outside, she whispered the question she had been too afraid to ask. What now? Nate leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her with a knowing look. Now, he said, you start over. And for the first time in a long time, Emily thought that maybe, just maybe, that wasn't such a bad idea. Because this real story was far from over. Emily didn't want to rely on anyone, not even Nate. So when he suggested she look for a job, she didn't hesitate. I want to do this on my own, she told him, determination flashing in her eyes. He respected that. And so, with a freshly printed resume and nerves she hadn't felt in years, she stepped into a small cafe, heart pounding. The manager, an older woman with kind eyes, gave her a chance. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a start. And after between the late-night talks and the silent understanding, they had become something more. But love wasn't just about warmth. It was about fear, too. Emily hesitated, unsure if she could allow herself to fall. She had lost everything once before. What if she lost him, too? What if she wasn't enough? The doubts gnawed at her, a quiet battle she never spoke aloud. But Nate saw it, felt it in the way she sometimes pulled back. And so, instead of rushing her, he gave her space. Because real love isn't about pushing, it's about patience. One evening, as they stood by the window, watching the rain paint patterns on the glass, she finally spoke. I never thought I'd get here, she whispered. Not just having a home, but feeling like I belong. Nate turned to her, his gaze steady, his voice softer than she had ever heard. You always belonged. You just needed someone to remind you. The words settled deep, wrapping around her heart. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop running from happiness. Because this wasn't just a new beginning. This was something she hadn't dared to dream about in years, a future. And whether she was ready or not, this touching story was far from over. A year ago, Emily had been invisible, just another soul lost in the shuffle of a world that moved too fast to care. Now, she was someone again. She had a job, a home, a life. But more than that, she had purpose. She didn't just survive anymore, she lived. And with every step forward, she found ways to help others who were where she had once been. She donated what she could, volunteered at shelters, and offered kindness to those who had been forgotten. Because she knew firsthand that one act of kindness could change everything. Nate watched her transformation with quiet admiration. She had come so far, but the truth was she had never needed saving. She had always had the strength. She just needed someone to remind her of it. And somewhere along the way, between the late-night talks, the stolen smiles, and the unwavering support, something undeniable had formed between them. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't rushed. It was love built on trust, resilience, and shared real stories of pain and healing. One evening, under the soft glow of city lights, Nate took a deep breath and did what his heart had been telling him for months. Emily, he said, voice steady but filled with emotion, I don't just want to be part of your past. I want to be part of your future. She froze, her heart pounding. This was the moment, the one she had feared, hoped for, and never thought would come. Could she truly allow herself to love again? Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that she had finally found a place where she was safe, loved, seen. She didn't need rescuing. She never had. But now she had someone who wanted to walk beside her, not in front of her, not behind her, beside her. She smiled, her fingers tightening around his. Then stay, she whispered. Stay in my future. The ring came later, but the commitment had already been made. It wasn't about wealth or security. It was about choosing each other despite everything. Despite their scars, their pasts, their fears. Nate had built skyscrapers, but Emily had built something greater, a life that mattered. And together, they would build something even stronger. A future A love that wasn't just about romance, but about resilience. Their story wasn't perfect. It had been messy, painful, uncertain. But real love isn't about perfection. It's about standing beside someone, even when the road isn't easy. And as they walked forward, hand in hand, Emily knew one thing for certain. She had once thought her story was over. But now it was just beginning.